Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. It's been a while, but I took the holidays off to spend with my family and it was a wonderful time. We got to have Christmas with both my children and one of them couldn't be there but attended via FaceTime. So I consider it having it with both my children and we had a good time. I want to say Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you, and I hope that you had a wonderful time with your family as well. If you have suffered a loss this past year, I know this holiday season may not have been the best one for you yet, but I hope you did find a sliver of joy in it. Well, what are we going to be doing today for today's video? For today's video, we're going to be talking about our plans for the garden of next year. We're also going to be talking about what worked well last year, what didn't work, and what my plans are to fix what didn't work. Each year, I like to do what I call a SWOT analysis of the garden, an SWOT, so strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and then try to address those the following year. So what were some of the strengths for the garden this year? We had a wonderful show of roses, and my irises are beginning to come into their own. There are certain plantings that I really liked. I loved how the color combinations came together. I loved the different textures that were there. And I also loved the expansion of this particular garden bed that I did last year and how it all came together. There was a lot of color. It was fuller than I thought it would be in its first year. And so that was a big win. Another strength and win for last year was the fountain. I did not start the year out intending to have a fountain, but the Lord blessed, and I was so grateful that that did happen for us. We have thoroughly enjoyed it, and as such, hoping to add another one next year on the other side of the yard, right over there. Now, that's one of the plans I have for this year, is the addition of another fountain. Other things that were strengths this year was the fact that the garden got a lot more evergreens, and you will see that in a tour that I'll be doing soon, and how the evergreen seems to add a certain structure, a certain element to the garden that's been missing. Now, everywhere you look in the garden, you know there's a flower bed because the evergreens anchor that flower bed. Another strength this year of the garden was the amount of dahlias that I planted and that did well. I did want to say though that some of the dahlias did not bloom, so I expect them to bloom this year because some of them I got in the ground rather late. What was one of the weaknesses from last year? My husband and my mom were both sick. Hubby had 2 surgeries and my mom also had surgeries, and so that took me out of both gardens, the veggie and the flower gardens, for a great period of time. And when you're not in the garden doesn't strive as well. So there were times when the garden was looking a bit rough, and I feel like that's an opportunity this year to try to see if I could do more to extend the colors, plant more drought resistant plants and things like that, so I have more blooming at all times. Another weakness I noticed was around July and August. Except for the hydrangeas, there really wasn't a whole lot blooming. May and June are strong months in my flower beds. So this year, my goal is to plant a lot more perennials that I'm growing from seeds, and I'll be sharing that with you. And then try to beef up things like echinacea, rudbeckia, black-eye Susans, but not the type that I've had. Things like delphiniums, larkspur, poppies, planting more irises, planting more roses, adding things like foxgloves and sweet williams that bloom longer and have more color to give to the garden during those off times. Another weakness that I noticed, as I said before, was the fact that the garden didn't have as much evergreen interest as I liked. I did add some December and bit a couple of weeks, last week, in January. But I also plan to add more during the course of this year. I also want to add different shapes in the form of topiaries, spirals, however, the classic ball shape. Whatever it is, I want to add more of that to give the garden some more interest. Opportunity. Oh, another weakness this year was the presence of an armadillo in my yard wreaking havoc in the flower gardens. So I did manage to plant quite a few echinacea and some veronica. That little rascal dug every last one of them up, and I'm not sure how many of them will return this year. I did add some Stokes aster in its place, and my plan is to start some coneflowers from seed, but they typically don't bloom the first year. So next year will be a great year. This year I may have to buy a couple of things to fill in until my great big show next year. But yes, that armadillo. So we came up with a plan. We are treating for grubs in the next month or so. Once we do that, we hope to have fewer visits because they come to visit to look for grubs. If there's no food source, they disappear. So that's my big plan for the armadillo. Opportunities. Opportunities is, like I said, adding another fountain. Another opportunities is the addition of more color and more plants. A huge opportunity that I'm going to be taking advantage of is adding a cut flower area. Now, up by our well house, my husband had his nursery up there, but he recently vacated it and moved over into our orchard. And when he moved over into our orchard, it left that bright sunny spot that's already been cleared. And all I've got to do is make my rows for cut flowers and sow them. Now, cut flowers, I'm not doing a whole lot this year. I may get a few dahlias from Costco. But I have some dahlia seeds that I'll be sowing. I'm going to be sowing some zinnias, some cosmos, some marigolds, because I have different types of marigolds, as well as some nigella and one or two other things to get me some cut flowers to supplement whatever I cut from my main flower beds. I don't want to take too much out the main flower beds to take away from the color out of the actual gardens. So planting a cut flower area, I feel, will do my garden well. Threats. The armadillo. That's the biggest threat that I have. And then also last year we had a period of time where we had no rain. It was like 6 or 7 weeks, no rain. And so the hydrangeas started to turn this weird brown color and things started to look pitiful because I do not have drip irrigation in my garden. And I'm not sure this is the year that's going to be done, but we will see. I would love to if I could, but if not, I'm not putting pressure on myself because this is also the year that I get a greenhouse. And that's coming in a video in the next week or two. And we'll be talking about the greenhouse that I'm getting, where I choose, so forth and so on. And then in the following video with the greenhouse, we'll be showing you how we put it together and things like that. So threats, the biggest one is the armadillo. The other one is the weather, which I have no control over. And one of the ways to mitigate that would be to get a drip irrigation, but I'm not sure if that's in the works. Let's see. So we talked about my plans for the year. No, we went the year in review, what worked, what didn't work. Let's talk about my plans for the year. One is the cut flower garden. We've talked about that briefly. Really, it's just trying it out, see how that works. I don't intend on selling flowers this year or maybe even next year, but eventually that's a long-term goal is I want to offer cut flowers. There's one florist in my little town. It'd be nice to sell her some of the things that I grow, but to also offer fresh homegrown bouquets to the people of my neighborhood, I think would be a great idea. So the cut flower garden is an area that I'm going to work on developing this year. I'm also working on adding some more roses to my garden, and I'll show you in another video some of the roses that I've selected this year and why I've selected those. Another thing that I'm doing this year, or I have done for this year, is I've added more irises. Y'all, I fell in love with irises maybe 4 years ago, and there hasn't been any turning back. Now what I've realized is I seem to be drawn a lot to the pink and purple irises, and I do have one orange, but other than that, not many that are different color to the pinks and purples. But you'd be surprised how many variations there are with pinks and purples as part of the color scheme. Another thing that I'm doing this year is taking advantage of the weather that we have here in Georgia to actually work during the winter months so that if anything transpires along the growing season, I don't feel as overwhelmed or as pressured. Last year was a bit of a pressure because I was out of the garden for so much of the season. But you know what? If you plant a perennial garden like I have, the garden will still stand on its own and still look good. Because if I didn't tell you that was an issue with me last year, you probably wouldn't have known. So that's the strength, that's the benefit of having a garden that's mostly perennials. Another thing that I did this year, or I'm doing, is I'm adding areas with pots, urns and pots and different things, and just planting them up to have spots of color, pops of color throughout the yard. So different things like that. There are a couple of other projects that I'm working on that I'll disclose as I do them. I'm going to tell you why. In the past, I've published a list of what my projects are going to be, and then all of a sudden I noticed those become other people's projects as well. So now I disclose my projects as I do them to avoid that. Now they say imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, but not when you, if a person imitates is one thing, but not when you go so far as to do the exact same thing and the exact same numbers that I said I was going to do it. So anyway, what else? Another thing this year that I plan to do is I'm going to be doing some tours of local nurseries. There are so many good nurseries in Georgia that I think if I could introduce them to the people of Georgia, and I plan to do some traveling, so I'll hit some up this year. I plan to be in Tennessee, North Carolina, New Jersey, maybe Pennsylvania, and Florida. So I'll be sharing something in those areas when I visit. In any event, I feel like I've rambled enough today. But I just wanted to come back on, say hey, tell you what my plans are, tell you kind of what worked, what didn't work, and then what we're going to be getting up to this year. Y'all, I have planned out my entire year of content. My plan is to post at least 2 videos a week. One of those videos will always be a tour of the garden this week, because I feel like when I do a tour that's once a month, we miss so many things. So if I did it once a week, we will be able to see everything in bloom and get that. Then I will be sharing a couple of different topics weekly, things such as why I ripped out the Black Eye Susans out my garden, that type of video. I find that you guys like when I teach something, so and I love to teach, so I'll be doing a lot more of those type of videos. So leave a comment below as to any type of content that you would love to see from me, and I'll be happy to consider it. Until next time, happy gardening.